Hello, it's me, MP, and it's been a while. We are finally at this point. Now, if you remember, about 4 years ago at this point, oh god, 4 years ago, I used to have a mini series of sorts where I would talk about the Collab servants from just sheer hype and adrenaline pulling me forwards through the pains of life. And because I was so excited for these collab servants, I would always just talk about them, use them as a chance to discuss, share some lore, and discuss their gameplay. And obviously, since the last few collabs haven't exactly been actual collabs, aside from maybe like Arcade and Samurai Remnant too, I haven't really been able to do them. I did want to do one for Samurai Remnant, but that event kind of came at a bad time where I was kind of on vacation in another country, so yeah, it didn't really happen for obvious reasons. However, I am now back, and just in time, because as I said in previous videos, we've now got a Mihoyo event, which is huge, and because of that, I obviously want to talk about the servants we got here, because oh my god, we're not even like halfway through the event at this point, but this event has been giving us so much good content, and it's reminded me exactly why I love Mihoyo so much, because it has been 12 years since the Mushroom has written these characters, and he has not lost his touch one tiny bit. When, and I'm saying when because at this point I'm thinking it's just a matter of time, when the sequels eventually come out, whether it be in 10 or 20 years, I don't know, but when they come out, they're gonna be fucking banger, because this event has been an absolute banger. It might just, at this rate, it might have potential to become my favorite event of all time, from a writing standpoint, character standpoint, basically everything. It's made all my dreams come true. So because of that, I have to talk about these servants, because oh my god, my adrenaline and hype has been completely uncontainable for the past few days. I have been unable to function despite really needing to function. And you know what? Screw it. We are in this together and we're having fun. So, servants. This is again going to be completely unscripted with the power of minimal editing. Yes, we are not bringing any effort into this as usual because I have no time and I'm at my limit. However, I'm still hyped. So, this event is all about Mihoyo, and which is, again, I've said this many times, the first Type Moon work. And obviously, you cannot have a Mihoyo event without the main character and main heroine. Let's talk about the servants in release order, and that means the first one is our ever-beloved protagonist, Aozaki Aoko. Surprisingly, she's a 5-star foreigner. Now, 5-star ranking, this is something I predicted incorrectly, but also, like, at the same time, once Arcade came out, I was like, yeah, no, Aoko's definitely going to be a limited 5-star. She kind of deserves it. She's one of the most powerful Type Moon characters in canon, so yeah, no. And considering the budget they put into her, yeah, this needed the 5-star treatment, and oh my gosh, did they deliver. Aoko is a foreigner, and what this implies, I have no idea at this point. But there have been several theories I've seen online about Aoko potentially going on a pilgrimage on universal scale after the events of Mihoyo, whatever that might be. We have no confirmation. I can't say anything for certain. However, what I can say is that Aoko has definitely been doing a lot of traveling, as we'll soon see. She's become sort of like a savior of Earth behind the scenes magician, as we all know and love her for being. She just appears and disappears and saves the heart of young people whenever they may need it. So, Aoko is one of the best characters in this entire story, and she is one of the most interesting servants in the game. See, now before we talk about her as a unit, we need to talk about her appearance. Aoko looks basically perfect. Now, her first appearance is her appearance in her casual outfit in Mihoyo. The background they used is the winter night background from the original game, and it's just straight up reused, but it's as gorgeous as ever, and it's the perfect background for Aoko. She looks gorgeous. Now, her second design is actually very interesting in that it's a summer uniform. Now, in Mihoyo of what we have so far, the first Mihoyo takes place during the colder eras, so fall and winter. Because of that, we have their winter uniforms instead. Now, what this implies to me, especially with how they'll take place in the next summer, and we might see this background with this new design for Aoko and put that on other students as well. So I'm surprised they went with this instead of her more iconic winter outfit, but maybe it's just because like teasing us for the future sequels that at this point I feel like they're gonna come. Finally, her last ascension is especially interesting. This one is a blue dress which kind of resembles how she looked in her 10th anniversary outfit, though it's not exactly the same. It's a lot more detailed. There's a bit of style to the hair. I'm not sure how I feel about the antenna, but I also think it's still a stellar design here. Koyama absolutely cooked with these, and the background in this, it's just gorgeous. With the blue star in the background, I wonder if this again gonna be an actual thing in Mihoyo. I don't know if it will, considering the fact that this looks very little like Miyazaki City, but who knows? Especially considering certain things in future Noble Phantoms that we will discuss definitely for sure. I think there's gonna be a lot to see. Now her final ascension is it's just comfy. She's got her guitar that she rarely ever uses, and it's back in winter, back in the time we all recognize Mihoyo to be in, and she's in her room. Now it's a very, very simple ascension art. It's not like super excessive or colorful, but regardless, I genuinely think this might be one of my favorite ascensions or final ascensions in the entirety of favorite art. It just is full of personality and full of life, and that's the kind of thing of why we love Mihoyo. Mihoyo has always been a story about the beauty of the mundane, the everyday, and how even though something might not seem remarkable, those things are probably the most amazing things in your life. Now, before that though, we do have to discuss one last thing with Aoko, is that surprisingly enough, her redshift design is not part of her ascensions. A lot of us were expecting that to be the case because that's how it usually works, right? It's like you get the most powerful state of the character in ascensions. That is not the case here. As we said, stage 3 is the dress. Instead, what happened is the concept of her redshift is straight up implemented through her Noble Phantasm in a whole new way we've never seen before. When she uses her Noble Phantasm, which we'll talk about in the future, she turns into a different form called Super Aoko. Yes, that's now the canon name of Redshift, and you know what? Considering how Aoko is, that's perfectly in character. Super Aoko it is. But yeah, Super Aoko is what she turns into after she uses her Noble Phantasm, and she looks stunning. It's not how she looked like in the original Mihoyo. A few people have commented on that, and the reason for that is actually a lot simpler than you might think. If you remember, when she became Super Aoko in Mihoyo, that was her exactly 10 years into the future. That was what she was wearing exactly in the same time 10 years later when that took place. Now, Mihoyo takes place in the 80s, I'm pretty sure. But this event takes place in 2001. So, it's safe to assume that time has passed, and it's pretty easy to assume that 20 years in the future, you're probably gonna be wearing something different to how you did 20 years before. Unless you just really, really like a certain set of clothes, I just don't see why Aoko would be wearing the same things. Heck, her original design was her in a t-shirt. Why did no one comment on that when Mihoyo came out? It's just natural. People change their clothes, and you know what? I, for one, think Aoko's new outfit looks absolutely stunning. Yes, it's super detailed, but Koyama just cooked with the dress with 2 different colors, the white, the black, the blue. It's perfect, and her scarlet red hair is just so eye-catching and so striking. It just brings me all the hype and all the excitement in the world. Now, Aoko, as I said again, she has 2 different forms, so her traits between Super Aoko and her regular Aoko are different. In fact, the main difference is that Super Aoko has generally better stats. She's a lot more offense-oriented compared to regular Aoko, who surprisingly has more HP. This is probably actually a good thing considering their roles, because regular Aoko is more like a transitional period for Super Aoko. So you'd want regular Aoko to stay alive longer, and instead you'd want Super Aoko to hit like a truck. So this kind of stat spread is actually pretty good. I'm going to murder the kids outside my house. Another interesting thing is that Aoko changes from man attribute for her regular form into the star attribute as Super Aoko. And whilst doing that, she actually has nullification to Enema Elish as Super Aoko. Aoko is definitely one of the stars of humanity. You'd know that her theme is literally first star. And considering what Nasu has with Aoko in mind, she's gonna be one of the most important people for the rest of history, let alone Type Moon as we know it today. Her deck is very interesting because she initially has a regular Saber deck with 2 arts and 2 busters, but once she becomes Super Aoko, she has a caster deck. And as you can see again, one unique thing is that she has AoE attacks for her face cards on both buster and extra attack. This is huge. It's something we expected we'd see with Olga Marie, but Aoko was just here like, nope, I'm the more important heroine. I'm coming in first. I'm taking this spot. And you know what? Good for her, because Aoko definitely deserves to be a one-of-a-kind unit, and this makes her face cards, at least, one of the best, if not the best face cards you will ever see in the game. And in terms of damage, it's just gonna be a bunch of fun. Her extra attack is literally her multi-blow thing. Oh, it's so good. Alright, now we have to talk about her skills. This is gonna be what makes this video the longest video of these videos today, because there's so much to talk about all of these unit skills, but especially Aoko, because Aoko is one of the few units in the game to have 2 entirely unique skill sets that do not match each other. So, as we're gonna go through this with regular Aoko first, and then Super Aoko later. Now, first of all, her passives. She has Existence Outside the Domain, usual for a foreigner, Territory Creation E and Item Construction E. These are caster passives, but it's natural since she is a magus. But the funniest thing is that they're the lowest rank, because canonically, Aoko is actually a really bad magus. She just happens to have the 5th magic, and that's what makes her really impressive. And also the descriptions that they use for her item skills were... just look at this. I hope she never changes. The most interesting thing is Magician C. Yes, Aoko is one of very, very few magicians in Type Moon. So what this does is that she has a debuff resistance, insta-kill resistance, and buff removal resistance. All of those are relatively small, but the big thing here is that any invincibility status she has becomes solid defense. It's completely unpierceable. This is just something that she has. If you have Castoria, you can just put that on her. She's just gonna have solid defense constantly. It's never going away, and that's a really nice thing to have. Alright, let's talk about these active skills. This is going to take a while. First off, Magic Bullet Charging. Now what this does is that it essentially gives Aoko a unique buff that's called Magic Bullet. What these do is that they increase Aoko's attack by 50% for 1 time. And each time she does it, she consumes 1 Magic Bullet. Now, Aoko can only make 3 with this skill initially. However, as you'll soon see, this skill at level 10 has a 2-turn cooldown. So that's not really that much of a problem. And not only that, it gives Aoko 20 stars per usage. At level 10, this is just absolutely ridiculous. And remember, this is a foreigner, so leveling up her skills is not going to be hard at all. This is just regular Aoko, but it's already absolutely insane. So that's something that's definitely worth looking forward to. Second skill is Magic Circuit's Rotation. This is probably her weakest skill, which is saying a lot because it's still really, really good. This is basically a better version of Helena's old charge skill. Now, what it does is it charges the party NP gauge by 20% for 3 turns. Now this is party, not just her, the party. So the party gets 20% per each turn. And also while that's happening, they also have 10 stars per turn. The reason this skill is Aoko's weakest is because it's on a 7-turn cooldown while it's only active for 3 turns. This means it's not going to be active for most of the battle. However, it's still really good. 60% charge is not bad. Even though they come through multiple turns, it's not bad. It's not great for 3-turn farming, but as we'll soon see, Aoko isn't quite made for that. She's more of a general challenge unit. And considering the long fights you'll be putting Aoko in, this isn't much of a problem in my opinion. Now, one of the most interesting days is Back to Those Days Once More. This is a one-of-a-kind skill that gives one ally a targeted color buff by 30% for 3 turns. They also get critical damage up for 30% for 3 turns, and health regen for 2000 HP per turn for, again, 3 turns. And one thing that she does is also give them protagonist correction. This is a completely unique skill exclusive to Aoko. Now, what protagonist correction does, you know how there are some servants out there with demerits, right? And there are some servants that for some reason have unremovable demerits, like Nagayoshi, Okida Jet Soji, Yumeiren, all those guys with really annoying demerits. Aoko has a skill that just prevents that. It just, you will not suffer for your consequences. If you have a Nagayoshi, this makes Aoko one of his, if not his, absolute best support, because that just means that guy can stack damage buffs without any defense down. He's just, if you get some like Mash and Aoko, Nagayoshi is just gonna do absolutely redonkadonk amounts of damage, but it's just gonna keep going and going, 50%. Oh, I look forward to the future, but yes, this is a thing that basically puts a bandage on all of the dumb, unremovable demerits that have ever existed in this game. And thank God for it, because I hate that feature. But yeah, that's just something that Aoko can do. However, I should also note there's one specific exception to this. And I will talk about that later, because this is potentially something that foreshadows some worrying things from Mahoutsukai, but we'll talk about that later. I'll get to that, back to that soon. Now, before talking about Super Aoko, I want to talk about her Noble Phantasm Unfinished Blue. This is her 5th magic, and this is what turns her into Super Aoko, and this is something you have to use every time in the game before you get to her Super Aoko form and thus her other set of abilities. Regular Aoko is basically just stalling until she uses this Noble Phantasm. So, in hindsight, her long cooldowns might not matter that much because you're not going to be using them for long anyways. Once Super Aoko is here, basically she gives herself a permanent buster and extra attack buff, which means those AoE buster and extra attacks, they're going to do a lot more damage. They're going to be doing like Space Ishtar tier extra attack damage after an NP. So they're just really strong now, and furthermore, as an overcharge effect, she increases her own critical damage for 3 turns. Now this is a bit less powerful, but considering the amount of star buffs she has, she can probably make pretty good use of this if you use her initially. With overcharge though, it becomes a lot better, especially since it's for 3 turns. So you'll have, at hypothetical 300, you'll have a 50% for 3 turns, which is pretty dang good. But yes, the main purpose of her Noble Phantasm is just to get her to Super Aoko. And while Aoko is already a pretty good unit, Super Aoko is where she gets absolutely, again, redonkadonk. Now, once she becomes Super Aoko, she gets extra passives. Now, both of these passives are by far her best passives. Now, first of all, Magic Bullet deployment. She just gets an automatic Magic Bullet every turn. She just makes them passively. You no longer have to activate that first skill constantly to get them. They're just gonna come whenever she needs them. She's gonna have an extra 1 per turn. And the second one is that she charges the party's NP gauge by 10% for each turn while regenerating 3 critical stars per turn. So basically, it's a slightly weaker version of her regular version's second skill, but as a passive. Now, the skill was already pretty solid, but if you just make that a passive, That's just really good. I don't think anyone's gonna complain about this as a passive. A 10% NP charge per turn for the party is slightly insane. But you know what? Aoko deserves it. Now, her first skill becomes Search of the Milky Way, and this basically doubles her magic bullets. Yes, because as we all know, in Mihoyo, once she becomes Super Aoko in Mihoyo, her iconic magic bullets, which are her regular magecraft, she can just make them out of thought, no problem, no charge. She just pumps them out like no tomorrow. She's a minigun at that point. And that is reflected here in this skill. She gets a bunch of magic bullets, which do the exact same thing, but this time it's a bit longer. It's on a 4-turn cooldown to make up for that, but considering again the fact that she has 6, that's not much of a problem. Now her second skill becomes Magic Circuit's Revolution. Now this straight up just becomes a 100% NP charge, Arcwade's style. I wouldn't say it's as good as Arcwade's charge, because Arcwade's charge gives her an NP damage buff, while instead Aoko's gives her a gigantic Starbow. It is a gigantic Starbow, I will say, and it will probably pair extremely well with her NP overcharge, but it's got a 7-turn cooldown, and that's the main problem with it. With a 7-turn cooldown, that can be pretty rough. Her last skill is a First Star C. This is one of those skills that drains her NP gauge entirely. So this is not something you should just use willy-nilly. This has a demerit, and it's a pretty considerable one. But once she uses it, the first thing she does is increase her own Buster performance for 5 turns, and her own extra card performance by 5 turns. The Buster card becomes 50% and the extra attack becomes 100%. So you stack that on her already existing buffs as Super Aoko, and then you also consider the fact that they're all AoE, she's gonna have the best Buster card in the entire game, and definitely the best extra card in the entire game. So that's just a thing now. Second thing is that she charges her party's NP gauge except herself. Now basically what this means is that the 100 gauge she has, she basically just splits it to both of her allies. The 50% goes to right and left units, or whatever party units you put with her. So she's basically just sharing her NP gauge with other people. So that's why there's a whole 100% demerit, is that she's giving it to other people. The other thing it does is that it reduces party skill 2 cooldown by 2%, but this is all except herself. Now, I wish this was for herself as well, because that would have really paired well with her second skill, but I get why it's not. You gotta keep it a bit balanced, and Aoko is already pretty insane as is, but god, that is a hefty 8-turn cooldown. On the pro side, you also get a 5,000% HP regen. So if it isn't obvious, this is not something you should use right away. This is something that you use when your allies are in a pinch, they're notably low HP. This is not something I can really comment on because I'm not really that creative when it comes to skills. However, I'm sure in the future people will figure out some pretty insane things to do with this. The final thing that Aoko does when she becomes Super Aoko is that she has an entirely new NP. Now she gets an AoE Arts NP, Earthlight Starbow. This recreates one of her most iconic scenes in the original Mihoyo game, and I mean, it's an AoE 5-hit NP. You can already say that this is already meant for farming, and considering the thing that it does, it has pretty ridiculous potential. Is it going to be the best for farming? I don't know for sure, but what I can say is that for challenge quests, Aoko is going to be an absolute beast. Now, why is that? Well, first of all, her NP ignores invincibility and ignores defense. That's great. That's just really good. She can't get pierced invincibility, but she can pierce anyone else's invincibility. That's just wonderful. It also reduces enemy defense before hitting as an overcharge effect, but another thing it does is that the more magic bullets you may have on Aoko, the more damage this NP does. So, for instance, if you use her first skill, Search for the Milky Way, and just get 6 magic bullets, combined with her passives, it could do a lot more damage. Now, there is a maximum of 10 magic bullets you can increase to this, but once you get to the 10 stack, which is unlikely but possible, the damage is going to be pretty ridiculous. Like, potentially some of the best in the entire game, ridiculous. And this is before she ever gets an NP buff, and I don't even know if she ever will at this point because Jesus God, this is strong. But all in all I can say is Aoko is a unit unlike anything we've ever seen. In terms of foreigners alone, she is one of a kind. In terms of servants, she's one of a kind. There's never been a servant that completely changes their entire gameplay style after using their Noble Phantasm once. This is what Jekyll and Hyde should have been when they were first introduced, but back in the day, devs did not know what they were doing. Because of that, we have Aoko here, and she's as good as you could ever wish for her to be. Is she a 3-turn farmer? No, absolutely not. However, her purposes very much speak for themselves, the amount of things she can do, and if nothing else, she is very strong in how unique she is. She's probably going to be an EX tier choice for any challenge quest in the future because of her foreigner class and the fact that she just does a lot of damage with the best kind of buffs like solid defense, invincibility pierce on NP, ridiculous amounts of damage and utility. She can heal everyone. It's just, she's a really good unit. She's versatile, and I don't even think we can group her in any particular sense yet because she's just that one of a kind. Now, the next servant they revealed after this was the best boy himself. I had my doubts that he would be added into Fate Grand Order, as I said in my video, but as Nasu proved me wrong, and for reasons that I don't feel about yet, we have Soujuurou Shizuki here as our welfare. And you know what? While I didn't predict he would be in the game, I am very much happy he is in the game because Soujuurou is probably my favorite character in all of Mihoyo. But the reason I didn't think he was going to be a servant is that Soujuurou is ultimately a regular human being in terms of the Nasuverse. He's definitely not a regular human being in terms of how he is as a person. He is quite unique and quirky. However, in terms of physical abilities, he's just a guy who trains really hard. He's physically very fit. And he's lived in the mountains for most of his life. That's mostly what Soujuurou is. And interestingly enough, in the story of the event, when he's summoned as a servant, he states he still feels like a regular guy. Like, most servants get like enhanced abilities when they're summoned. Soujuurou is not the case. He's just like, nah, I just feel the exact same. I still have to eat, I still have to sleep, I still have to do everything a regular human being does. You know what? Fair enough. If there's one person that should break that rule, it's Soujuurou. Now, Soujuurou is a 4-star welfare berserker, which I did not expect, but I'm not complaining about because from a gameplay sense, it's definitely a benefit. Now, Soujurou's design in the game is exactly his casual design in Mihoyo itself. It's just a regular guy. He's wearing his regular shirt, regular pants. He's just being Soujuurou Shizuki, the one, the only, the boy we all know and love. It's an unremarkable design, but again, as I've said before, that's kind of the point of Mihoyo. Don't overlook the things that seem unremarkable. His stage 4 ascension, whoo boy! Now, I've seen a lot of people that were surprised that Soujuurou is ripped, but nah, he is canonically ultra ripped, and that's made very obvious in the game itself as well. He is physically absolutely ripped to heck, and he's physically probably the strongest guy in the Nasuverse as we know so far. This guy could probably bench press a tree. That's what I'm saying. You can grate cheese on him, and I'm just in love with this final ascension. It's simple, it's gorgeous, and the details in this. Koyama has not lost his touch. He knows these characters and he draws them so dang well. Now, as a unit, Soujuurou actually has, interestingly enough, average stats. For an offensive berserker like him, I don't know if that's necessarily positive, but considering how his deck is built, it might actually be uniquely helpful. I can't say for certain yet, but again, we'll see. Now, interestingly for a berserker, Soujuurou actually has 2 arts cards, which is really nice to have, considering it helps him better with his NP gen, and considering his first skill, that's definitely something that's going to come into use a lot. One other thing worth mentioning is that despite being a man attribute servant, Soujuurou actually has Enuma Elish nullification. Why does he have that? I don't know. Ask Nasu. But considering how detached he is from all of society, that I also don't think that's unfitting. Soujuurou is a rule breaker, as we'll soon see. He is quite unique in a lot of ways. Now, interestingly enough for a berserker, Soujuurou does not have regular berserker passives. Instead, he has the assassin passage, critical star generation. Now, this is a lore thing because you just don't know Soujuurou again. He's very unremarkable. He just doesn't stand out. But it doesn't really help him because he only has one Quake card, and he's definitely not a crit servant in any way. So, I would have preferred Madness Enhancement in terms of gameplay, but you know what? Lore is lore. Can't fight against Nasu. It is what it is. Interestingly enough, he also has Knowledge of the Soa Sea. This is the only time this is a passive, because usually this is an active skill, which causes a servant to ignore evasion and increase their own star generation. Here instead, it increases his own critical attack chance resistance by 10%. It's definitely useful, but not something that's super useful. Now, by far his best passive is Good Luck Charm EX. It's something that's related to the story of Mahoutsukai itself. This is something that Aoko gave him. And basically, it's the power of cute girl. What this does is Soujuurou has complete immunity to terror, confusion, and skill seal. So these effects just will not touch him. They will have no effect on him. He will resist them completely. That's cool. Confusion is a niche thing, but terror and skill seal definitely will come in useful. And I can definitely see this becoming very, very helpful, especially since a certain caster we might be talking about later. Now, his very first skill is already ridiculous. It is Pilgrimage Away from Death and Killing, because as we all know from Soujuurou, murder is wrong. You can't kill people, and Soujuurou doesn't either. It's a simple 20% arts and buster buff for 3 turns, which isn't amazing, but it's helpful and that's consistent. But the main draw here, and the reason you use this skill, is that it uniquely gives him death evasion for 5 times that lasts for 3 turns. Now, what is death evasion? This is a unique kind of evasion that only activates, that only procs when Soujuurou is about to die. So basically, you can sort of treat this as a guts that activates when Soujurou's about to die. This death evasion basically nullifies the damage he takes. He just goes, nope, I'm not dying this time. You didn't kill me. Okay, Soujuurou, whatever you say. The best thing about death evasion is that it's actually stackable with regular evade. So if you put a regular evade on him, he's still gonna have death evasion for next 2 turns, in case that matters in this situation. Considering Soujuurou is a berserker, this acts as his main form of survivability, and it's a really unique but really, really good form of survivability. Like, 5 hits is not anything to scoff at. This is essentially a 5-hit guts, and considering how good guts are as is, I can't really complain about this. Yes, the offensive values might be low, but the guts, man, that's why you use it. Soujurou's second skill is a bit of a unique one. He has one of the most unique NP charges I've ever seen in this game. Now, if you know Oberon, you know that his NP buff is, instead of it buffing in the NP directly, he multiplies whatever buffs you have. And this is the exact same case with Soujuurou here with his NP charge. Basically, what he does is, at level 1, he multiplies his NP by 0.5%. So if you have a 50% NP gauge, he'll increase it by 25%. But if you have this skill at level 10, he instead has a 100% NP charge, which means he basically doubles whatever NP gauge you have right now. I misunderstood this at first, personally, but yeah, so basically how it works is if you have a 50% NP gauge at level 10, you'll have a 100%. If you have 100%, you'll have 200%, and so on, so on. Basically, at level 10, this NP gauge doubles whatever Soujurou's NP gauge is at the time. So if you have something like a kaleidoscope or a 50% NP gauge, you can basically just fire off his NP immediately. And another thing that implies that you're meant to use Soujuurou for a bit of sustain is the fact that he also has a very strong crit buff. Now, his crit buff at default is a 25%. It's not that much, however, he gets more critical damage depending on how low his HP left. Kind of like how Ku gets more attack when he is on lower HP. So this actually pairs extremely well with his Death Evade skill, because since he has Death Evade, he'll be able to get to as low HP as he'd want and survive that. So if you have that, you can pair that with this skill to get some pretty dang good crit damage with a maximum of 100% crit damage when you're less than 25% HP, which is very, very good. Finally, and this is another very unique skill, is that what Soujuurou does is that it changes his command cards to one of each card per turn. So like, you know how Artoria's second skill, after buff, changes all of her cards to buster cards. Soujuurou can do that, but for literally any card type. So he can change it to all quick, all arts, or all buster. It depends. And whatever card he changes it to, he will also get a 30% buff for that singular card. So if you buff your quick, you'll have a quick buff. If you buff your arts, you'll have an arts buff. And if you buff your buster, you'll have a buster buff. This can be combined with his first skill, hypothetically, for a 50% buff of a certain card type for one turn. This is something that can be very useful if you want to like get something like a bunch of stars for crit, or if you want to get a bunch of NP gen for his NP. As I've said, getting NP for this unit isn't that bad because, as we'll soon see, he has a very, very rare self-sacrificial NP. Now, his NP is not something we actually ever saw in Mahoutsukai as is. Like, I've seen a lot of people misunderstand this NP for a certain attack he pulls off in the visual novel, but no. That is actually replicated through his extra attack. It's one of the few times where Soujuurou actually has an offense attack because, again, he's a normal person. Most of his animations show Alice and Aoko ironically attacking him, missing, and then attacking the enemy instead, which is how it should be. And this Noble Phantasm, on the other hand, is entirely something we've never seen before. Now, as you can see, this Noble Phantasm kills Soujuurou, and that leads to a lot of implications that I'd rather not think about right now. We'll have to wait until Natsu answers us in the future sequels, but I'm just not gonna think about it. However, what this Noble Phantasm also does is, like Aoko, it ignores invincibility for one turn, and interestingly, it ignores damage cut for one turn. This is the only Noble Phantasm in the entire game to ignore damage cut. So this is a Noble Phantasm that will bypass any form of defense outside of solid defense. And as for regular defense up status, it will deal 150% extra special damage against enemy with any form of defense buff. This essentially makes it so Soujuurou can actually do extra damage against enemies with defense buffs, which is pretty funny. It kind of makes it sort of like Muramasa, where he does more damage to enemies with invincibility. I don't know how practical this will be in practice, since enemies don't always have defense buffs, but it will be nice to have for sure. Furthermore, as an overcharge effect, he also increases his own attack for one turn, which is why, like I said, since he has an insta-death NP, it might be worth charging his NP using face cards first before using his Noble Phantasm. However, I'm not entirely sure on how that would work. That being said, he is very much a self-sacrifice, do a bunch of damage, and leave for next unit kind of unit. So he's like a single target Arash. However, I wouldn't use him specifically as one because unlike Arash, he doesn't get extra damage from using his Noble Phantasm. Like, he doesn't out-damage any unit like Lubu or Mori Nagayoshi. this is more of like a novelty thing. However, when you have all of the skills available to you, he can be very helpful and definitely form a certain type of use that you'll never see any other servant. And that, as I said, seems to be the name of the game with these Mihoyo units, is that they're all one of a kind. And the thing I also want to talk about is, remember how Aoko prevents demerits? The one thing she doesn't to prevent is insta-death. So, in case you were thinking of using Aoko to prevent her best friend from dying, she can't do that. Don't think about it, 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 don't think. Finally, and the one we've waited the most longest to take a look at, we have our angel, Alice Kuonji. Now, this is, once again, an extremely weird servant. She is a caster unit, as we've expected. It's probably the only correct thing I've predicted from this game, and she is a second SSR. For the first time ever, we don't have any banner SRs. Instead, we have 2 SSRs. But considering the budget that went into these servants, I am not surprised. I'm also not surprised because Nasu really loves his Mihoyo characters, and you know what? Good on him. I think if there's one event that deserves 2 SSRs instead of having an SR, Mihoyo is definitely that event. They definitely deserved it. Now, Alice is a very unique caster in that she is, as you'll see, a very rare quick caster. Now, a lot of people have immediately written her off because of that. I'm not entirely sure if I agree. While I do agree quick is the weakest card type by far, we also don't have that many quick casters in the game. They're very rare. I think we'll still only have 3, and none of them are particularly outstanding. Alice might be the exception, so for quick users, you might actually have a lot of use with Alice, and we'll talk about how that is, because even despite her weaknesses, she is very unique again. Now, in terms of her ascension, her first ascension is her, well, not casual outfits, it's her outdoor outfit that she uses in the winter. This is how she's most commonly seen, it's how she's seen in most of her fights. Alice usually wears this outfit whenever she's out and about, and it's a fantastic look for her. I mean, Alice is one of the most fashionable heroines in Type Moon. I've said this in other places, but I looked at her and I was like, this is perfect, no notes. Her second ascension, on the other hand, is extremely gorgeous. I did not expect Nasu to pull out the sundress for Alice. But personally, I think the whole white contrasting her black color scheme very much fits, and she looks absolutely gorgeous in this. Finally, we have a very unique, one-of-a-kind scene design, and this is, I don't really know how to begin with this. I have a suspicion that either this is sort of like Aoko's dress ascension, where it's just there for decorative reasons, it's not really that important, or it could tie to a certain thing that's going to happen in the future Mihoyo, sort of like Soujuurou's NP. I will come back to this, but essentially with her third ascension, I have a theory that this might tie into her history with her family. That's all I'll say for now. As a unit, Alice has high HP and low attack. This isn't the best thing to have on Alice, especially since she is very much an offensive unit. However, there are also some quirks to her gameplay that might imply otherwise. It's not really easy to say, but I feel like we'll have to test this a lot because Alice is, she's one of a kind again. Like I said, funnily enough, she's finally weak to Enema Elish, so we truly have a unit in Mihoyo that's actually weak to Enema Elish. Holy crap, it's about time. She has 5 hits on both Quick and Art, which makes her very good at NP Gen. In terms of passives, she has Territory Creation naturally, and she's very good at it. Atom Construction, which increases her own debuff success rate, very good. And very interestingly, she has Folklore Defense, which is basically a damage cut for any attacks that are not from a Noble Phantasm by 400%. Now, it doesn't seem like much, but for a passive, that's very helpful. So if you bring her against any assassins, they're not going to be doing that much against her. And furthermore is that this increases her own damage against debuffs that do damage to her like poison, burn, or curse. So while they might still do solid damage, Alice is gonna mitigate that a bit, which is very, very helpful. Finally, her last passive, Yumina, is very much a lore thing. Now, the first effect is she has a permanent instant kill gut status for 5 times. So if there are any units like Ryogi Shiki who come in and have insta-kill, she will actually not die from that. This will be a permanent buff that's active for 5 times. You might ask, hey, why isn't this just a regular guts? Well, considering the fact that this is a passive, I feel like a built-in guts might be a bit too powerful, but then again, we also have Proto Merlin as a thing, so who knows. Either way, I'm personally not too mad about it. It does make the skill very niche, but at least it's there. But more importantly, Yumina also makes it so any revival that she has by guts will recover by 2000 once the guts is active. And this also means for other guts, so every single time. This is a thing for any other guts. I generally think that this is a very helpful tool, and it's just a nice thing to have. While the last thing is a unique buff, is that it gives her a one-of-a-kind buff again, like Aoko, called Robin Counter. This buff will only be active 13 times. Now what this buff does, I'll explain later, because it ties into another part of her kit. Now her first skill is what I thought would be her Noble Phantasm, is Diddle Diddle. Now Diddle Diddle is essentially the thing that makes Alice able to use any of her abilities. It's her Magecraft. This essentially increases her quick performance and arts performance for 3 turns. It's not a huge amount of 20%, but it's helpful, especially when you consider the fact it is also a 50% NP gauge. Yes, this skill immediately charges her by 50%, which is very, very good already. That alone makes me a lot more forgiving with the fact that these are 20% buffs. But as that wasn't enough, we also get a further 30% NP rate buff effect. Now, this is definitely something that will be more helpful for 3-turn farmers, but even then, considering Alice is slightly a below average NP gen, this is very, very useful. Especially when you apply this with both quick and arts, this makes those cards super effective, and honestly just generally just a really good skill. Very fair that they gave it a 6-turn cooldown. I have no complaints with this one. Second skill is equally very simple. Thames Troll, Giant of the Bridge. This increases Alice's own attack and defense for 30% each. However, if she is in a forest, city, or dark battlefield, this will increase to 50%. Now, Thames Troll should technically only work if it's a river. However, what counts as a river is very, very vague at this point, so Forest and City strengthening this skill is what's referenced to this. Anything that's an underground river or any form of water counts as a river to Thames Troll. And I guess how they represent this Noble Phantasm only being used there is instead shown as being stronger in those situations. Personally, I have no complaints about this. Like, it'd be really bad if we just couldn't use a single skill unless you're in a specific scenario. So I have no problems with this, and while it does suck that the effects are tied to certain battlefields, at least the battlefields are very, very common. Like, even at base, a 30% defense and attack are pretty solid, but at 50%, that's very, very good. I don't know if I would have made this a 6-turn cooldown skill, but I guess you have to do something for balance. Final skill is Lost Robin Rondo, Robin's Murder. Now this is the funny bird skill. This is where the Robin counters come into play. So this is a skill at level 10, is on a shocking 2-turn cooldown, like Aoko's first skill. What this does is, when you use this skill, it gives a 1-attack 2-turn invincibility. This is a special kind of invincibility unique to Alice called Substitution, which is basically a solid defense skill that cannot be removed. This is a skill that will have presence regardless of what the opponent has, so you cannot remove Robin from Alice in this scenario. It is only lasting for 1 attack, but it will remain on Alice as long as you do it. And once this is used, this will also decrease the Robin counter by 1. So this means since Alice gets 13 Robin counters with her passive, you can only use this skill a total of 13 times per battle. Another effect with the skill is every time you use it, you also get a 20% NP charge for free. Now, while it is a bit of a shame that you can only use this 13 times in a battle, most battles will not last that long. So honestly, this isn't that much of a demerit, and honestly, considering how strong Robin counter is, I have no complaints. Like, this is a 2-turn cooldown invincibility that cannot be removed. Yes, it only lasts for 1 attack, but sometimes that's all you really need. And the fact that it also charges her own NP gauge is just, it's extra icing on the cake. Finally, her Noble Phantasms. Now, Tame's Troll should technically also count as Noble Phantasm, but I guess they just didn't consider it as important as the other two, which we'll talk about. Alice's Magecraft involves these things called ploys. These ploys are part of Ploy Kishaw. It's a thing that essentially takes fairy tales and brings them to life through sort of familiar-like constructs. Robin is one of them. All of her skills are one of them. They're all based on fairy tales, and she has 3 specific that are called the Great 3. They are the most powerful ploys in her arsenal, and they're considered some of the most powerful magecraft to ever exist. This is why Alice is considered one of the best modern mages in our current society. Tame's Troll was one of them, but as I said before, they turned him into a skill. So our main one is Flat Snark. Flat Snark is the Oil of the Moon. This is an AoE quick NP with 7 hits, so this is prime for looping if you pair with her first skill. It ignores evasion and increases their own damage against human enemies by 30% for 1 turn. So any human enemies, somehow if you ever find any human waves, they'll do extra damage to them. It also inflicts terror status on enemies for 1 time for 3 turns, along with also reducing their critical attack chance by 20% for 3 turns. Furthermore, it also deals extra damage to enemies with the Man attribute. So if you ever have any Man attribute enemies, like ironically the rest of the Mahoutsukai cast, I guess this does extra damage against them. Now, the interesting thing is that on Alice's 3rd ascension, her Noble Phantasm actually changes from Flat Snark to Wander Snatch. Now, this is actually one of the Great 3 that we haven't seen in the Mahoutsukai we've gotten so far. The most we've ever seen of Wander Snatch is in material books, and that's really been it. It was used very briefly in the Mahoutsukai that we've seen, but never to a point where we actually saw it in action. Now, functionally, this Noble Phantasm is identical to Flat Snark. However, in terms of lore, Wander Snatch is considered Alice's most powerful ploy, as well as her most dangerous, to the point that even Aoko herself is terrified of it. Based on the Noble Phantasm animation, I have a theory that Wander Snatch might sort of symbolize Alice's attachment to her lineage, and how the status of the Yumina bloodline has sort of contained her and controlled her entire life until this point. During the trailer, we also see Robin going to face the Wander Snatch, so there's a potential future sequel hook where Alice might have been taken over by Wander Snatch in the visual novel, and it's up to Robin along with the other main characters to help her out. I can't really say anything for certain. This Wander Snatch is the first time we've ever seen this Noble Phantasm, this great ploy, and that it's functionally identical. What will we see in the future? I have no idea, but considering that her 3rd ascension seems to be Alice as a perfected magus, while at the same time seemingly being taken over by Wander Snatch or Yumina, I'm very excited for the future. Anyways, that's really all I have to say about the Mahoutsukai event. It's a pretty big event, and because of that, there's also a lot of things to say and theorize about. The Mahoutsukai event is pretty much done by the time I'm recording this, and what I can say is that this isn't really just a Mahoutsukai event. It more feels like a celebration of the Nasuverse in general. I really hope, and I'm praying to God, that this is a sign in the future that Nasu is building up the wider Nasuverse again, so that he makes good on those plans that he and Takeuchi has promised in the past. Hopefully this is one of many steps we have to finally finishing up the Nasuverse and seeing everything that goes in through the mushroom's head. Either way, I'm personally very happy with this collab. I couldn't be happier with these servants, and the only thing that I could really ask for at this point is to make Toko a servant. Once you do that, you're pretty much set as far as I'm concerned. This is one of my favorite events in all of Fate Grand Order, and I cannot wait for potential NA peeps or future servers to get this as well. Anyways, that's all from me. That's MP signing out, and I hope all of you have a wonderful evening. I'll see you all somewhere else on the internet. Have a great day.